I find that individuals have all the answers. They just need that support, that guidance, and that directions.
He made history in 1995 when he became the first Black Canadian to hold a cabinet-level position in Ontario. In 2003, Alvin Curling again made history when he was elected Speaker of the Ontario Legislature. A native of Jamaica, Curling's first crack at politics was when he ran in 1984 and lost by 5 votes. The next year, Alvin Curling took another shot, this time running provincially for the Liberals. He won easily and never lost another election in 20 years.
It's the largest riding in Canada, 414 polls. When I decided that I would run, I didn't realize what a poll was.
In 2005, Alvin Curling retired from politics to accept a diplomatic post as Canada's ambassador to the Dominican Republic.
The keynote is stay in school, go on to higher education, and do something with your life.
Dr. Anna Jarvis is a pediatric emergency care specialist at Toronto's Hospital for Sick Children. When this native of Jamaica noticed a lack of motivation by students, including her own children, to do better and excel, she and some colleagues decided to do something about it.
We would have them observe in the emergency department if the families were comfortable with it. Right? And so they got the inside picture of working in the emergency.
She's also the Associate Dean in charge of Health Professions and Student Affairs at the Faculty of Medicine, University of Toronto.
Make an effort to expose the summer mentorship children to a variety of health cares.
Many of the program's graduates are now in college, and Dr. Jarvis couldn't be more pleased.
She came to southern Alberta before it was even Alberta. She came in 1877 with the MacLeod family. Now the MacLeod family, for anyone who's lived in Alberta knows, that's southern Alberta's founding family.
She was an entrepreneur running her own business in the late 1800s. Annie Saunders was one of the most prominent Black citizens in Pincher Creek, Alberta.
She was a very important figure in Alberta's history, but completely forgotten, just completely left out of the historical record.
She is listed in the 1881 census as being 45 years old, widowed, and a Methodist. Annie Saunders used her connections to one of Alberta's first families to open 3 businesses, including a boarding house and a restaurant. Saunders was all but forgotten until Calgary author Cheryl Fogo stumbled upon her researching the history of her own ancestors.
Well, I was born in Toronto in 1933.
He was one of the first local musicians to break the color bar in the 1950s on Toronto's Yonge Street, where clubs made no secret of the fact that blacks were not welcome.
Whenever they needed a drummer, I got the first call.
At age 76, Archie is now a Canadian jazz legend.
I'm a self-taught musician. I depended on my ears.
He dropped out of school at an early age to pursue his passion, and along the way, he learned an important lesson.
There's a lot of work I missed out on because of my inadequacy to be able to read music.
To encourage up-and-coming musicians to stay in school and pursue their dreams, Archie has established a scholarship fund to provide bursaries to talented students.
When he was articling out in Vancouver, the firm that took him on, they first had a meeting with everyone, all of the staff, to make sure they'd be prepared to work with a Negro.
In his younger days, retired lawyer Edward Searles was one of the very few legal experts in Toronto's black community. He helped fight many battles for his community and its members facing discrimination in housing and unfair treatment anywhere.
So much of the work that Daddy has done has been around social justice.
So when he recently lost his beloved wife, Sylvia Kathleen Searles, the community remembered his good deeds and came out to help him mourn. A stroke has robbed this old warrior of his speech and left him slightly paralyzed. Now just a shell of the brilliant young man called to the bar in British Columbia in 1957. A first for this Canadian-born lawyer in Canada's most western province.
The man was big. He was 6'6", 220 pounds, and broad.
His appointment as Speaker of the British Columbia Legislature in 1994 made worldwide news.
The first black to be elected as the Speaker of a House in Canada.
Emery Barnes was first elected to the BC Legislature in 1972 as representative for Vancouver Centre.
He lost the first time out, and then he ran another time, and he got elected, and then he got elected and elected and elected.
Barnes was a social worker before entering politics and became a champion of human rights, social justice, and poverty. Born in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1929 and raised in Oregon, Barnes came to Vancouver in 1957 to play football with the BC Lions. He stayed and made Vancouver home. Barnes was instrumental in the starting of the British Columbia Black History Society and was its first president. In 1998, Emery Barnes died of cancer at the age of 68.
I've been very lucky. But you never forget, there are a lot of people who are not as lucky as you are.
In a journalism career spanning many decades, Montreal-born Phil Fraser has pretty much so done it all.
I've had a wonderful, charmed life. You know, I came out of high school, I went into radio, I've been in radio, I've done everything that could possibly be done in broadcasting.
In 1970, Fraser co-anchored CBC Edmonton's Supper Hour News, and in 1974, he hosted The Phil Fraser Show. Phil Fraser received recognition for his work, a doctorate degree in literature, and the Order of Canada. Now semi-retired and living in Edmonton, Fraser is busier than ever, recently completing a biography on Canadian Olympic sprinter Harry Jerome.
First black person in the whole world to win a world boxing title.
Born in 1870 in Halifax, Nova Scotia, George Dixon was the first black person to hold a world boxing title in any class.
In 1893, he published a book called A Lesson in Boxing.
He was also the first boxer to use shadow boxing in training.
During his reign as a boxer, he was the most recognized black person in the world.
Known as Little Chocolate, Dixon was only 5'3" and weighed 87 pounds. He was crowned world bantamweight champion in 1890 after knocking out an English competitor in 18 rounds.
They say he's the first black person in the world to win a world title in any sport.
Dixon developed his boxing skills in Boston, Massachusetts, where his family moved when he was a little boy, but he never forgot his Canadian roots. George Dixon died in January of 1908. On the water's edge in Stanley Park in downtown Vancouver stands the statue of one of the city's most celebrated citizens. He's British Columbia's Athlete of the Century. In his time, Canadian world-class sprinter Harry Jerome had no equal. His athletic prowess put Canada on the map. Born in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, September 1940, Jerome moved to Vancouver with his mother as a young boy. Jerome was an exceptional athlete, but it wasn't until he set the world record in Saskatoon in the 100-meter dash in 1960 that the country and the world took notice. But that was just the beginning. Jerome would go on to break and set many records in both the 100 yards and 100-meter dashes, including tying a world record of 9.3 seconds in the 100-yard dash held by the incomparable African-American Jesse Owens. Harry Jerome died on December 7, 1982. He was the first to break through a barrier that once discouraged black Canadians from serving with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Canada's national police force.
When he was in high school, his teachers were telling him, you should come up with a plan B, Hartley, because there's no such thing as a black Mountie, and I don't think you're going to get in.
In 1969, Hartley Gosselaar dared to do what many before him had tried and found themselves shut out. He joined the RCMP as a constable, realizing a childhood dream.
He was watching a visit by Queen Elizabeth II to Canada when he was young, a youngster, 5, 6 years old. He saw that the motorcade was being led by Mounties on motorcycle, and he pointed to the TV and told his mother that's what he wanted to be. He wanted to be a Mountie.
And nothing would stop him. Gosselaar was born in St. John's, New Brunswick. His father died when he was just 5 years old. He was raised by his mother. Today, the 17,000-strong RCMP has some 300 black officers.
You're in the corner, get your stick up like that.
In his youth, like most young men in his hometown of Toronto, Herbert Carnegie's dream was to play professional hockey with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now 89, Carnegie still remembers the words of former owner of the Maple Leafs as he watched the dazzling and charismatic 18-year-old Carnegie practice at Maple Leaf Gardens.
My coach, he said, Herbie, do you see that man sitting in the blue? And he says, that's Conn Smythe. And he said he would take you for the Leafs tomorrow if somebody could turn you away.
Carnegie and his equally talented brothers never made it to the majors because of the color barrier of their time. Instead, they played amateur hockey in the mining towns in northern Ontario and Quebec. Herbert Carnegie lost his sight years ago to glaucoma, but is pleased to see now young black players are drafted on the basis of their skills, the only thing he says really matters. He was the first governor of British Columbia.
His father was white, his mother was black.
His father was a Scottish sugar plantation owner, his mother a black slave. Born in British Guiana, James Douglas was educated in Scotland. At the age of 16, he left for Canada to become a fur trader, joining the Northwest Company, now Hudson's Bay. He rose through the ranks to become Chief Executive Officer, setting up headquarters on Canada's west coast. In 1858, James Douglas was appointed governor of British Columbia. The same year, the first black pioneers arrived in Victoria at his invitation, helping them to purchase land and settle in their new home.
He set so many of the principles that of society that we live with today. He set way back in the 1850s.
Word of a place free of discrimination and persecution quickly reached the families they left behind, and many more black pioneers would follow, finding welcome in a country they called Canaan, Canada.
As a person of color, you have to be as good as and better than.
She's the province of Ontario's Fairness Commissioner. Born in Grenada, Jean Augustine came to Canada in 1960. Her first job, a domestic. Augustine attended Teachers College while studying part-time for a bachelor's degree at the University of Toronto. She went into teaching after graduating, became a school principal before being appointed head of the Toronto Public Housing Authority. In 1993, she ran for the Federal Liberal Party in Etobicoke and was elected to Parliament. Augustine served as Parliamentary Secretary to former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien and Secretary of State in Chrétien's cabinet.
Paul Martin took me out of his cabinet. Not only did they lose a woman's voice, but they also lost that minority vote.
Among her many accomplishments is getting her fellow Liberal colleagues to back her bill, establishing Black History Month in February here in Canada. He's a legend in his adopted hometown of Vancouver, British Columbia, for his work with children and the hundreds of lives he's saved.
He was the person who started looking after small children and making sure that they were safe at the beach.
Joe Fortes was born in Barbados in 1865 and ended up in Vancouver by way of England after a shipwreck.
He lived first in a tent by the beach and then finally got a little cottage, and that was how he spent his entire life.
A big black man with a Caribbean accent who lived in the West End between 1890s and the 1900s. A public library bears his name, so does a famous restaurant and a water fountain for kids. He worked at odd jobs, laborer, chef, bouncer, but it was his gentle touch with the many children he taught how to swim, free of charge during the long hot summers, and the citizens he saved from drowning that secured his place in Vancouver's history. In 1986, he was named Vancouver's Citizen of the Century. He lived 103 years, most of it as a resident of Toronto.
He used to come to our home. In fact, he was a pallbearer at my father's funeral.
Donald Moore was born in Barbados in 1891. He arrived in Canada in 1913, settling in Toronto, a city that was mostly European. Canada's restrictive immigration policies deliberately kept out people of color.
No Jews, no niggers, no dogs. That was it when we were kids.
Moore could not tolerate the way his adopted country treated people like him attempting to come to Canada for a better life.
He was interested in people, and he was interested in the injustices of people.
In 1954, Donald Moore led a delegation to Ottawa to convince the Canadian lawmakers to change the immigration rules, allowing people of all backgrounds to settle here, making Canada one of the most diverse and envied countries in the world. Oliver Bowen was the first engineer from the Black Pioneer settlement of Amber Valley, Alberta.
I grew up with him. He was determined to get his education and rise out of from a farming, poor family.
Born in 1942, Bowen graduated from the University of Alberta with a degree in civil engineering in 1965. He joined the City of Calgary's engineering department, and among his legacy, the city's light rail system, one of the most efficient in North America.
He doesn't appear anywhere in any of the plaques on the light rail stations.
He traveled the world sharing his knowledge with public transit officials. Bowen also helped many third world countries develop and improve public transit systems. Oliver Bowen succumbed to cancer January 1st, 2000. The City of Calgary plans to honor him by naming a building after him.
I move mountains, but nobody realizes why the mountain is moving.
She has made quite a name for herself in the city of Richmond, British Columbia, where she lives.
I used to say the things that nobody wanted to say.